Hello and thank you for joining me for MTA's In the Fast Lane podcast today. This episode we're going to be looking at one of the biggest issues facing our country, and that's crime. Now I should say at this point we're going to be discussing some sensitive material specifically about violent and sexual crime. So I would advise that if that's something that might upset you, you perhaps don't listen to this episode. But the reality is that for most of us, crime is a reality that will affect us at some point in our lives. Whether it's theft, assault, sexual abuse or even murder, chances are we'll know somebody who's been affected if we haven't been ourselves. It's an issue that's top of the agenda for all political parties this year, as it should be. Our guest in the Fast Lane today occupies a unique role and has worked with victims of crime for many years. She's the government's Chief Victims Advisor. Her name is Ruth Money, and she joins us today in the Fast Lane. Welcome, Ruth. It's lovely to see you. You're looking very well, and great to see you again after many years when we first made contact.
It's been a while.
It has been a while.
Thank you.
And lots to cover today, a lot of stuff to talk about. And thank you for all the tireless work you've done for victims of crime in New Zealand. You'll already be familiar to a lot of people listening and watching because you've made many appearances in media over the years.
Yes, I have. That's not why I do it, but it is part of the role. Yes.
Let's talk about your current role first as Chief Victims Advisor, and then perhaps after that we could sort of go back a little bit and talk about how you got there, and then some of the bigger picture issues around crime as well, if that's cool. Yep. So, tell us about the role. What does the Chief Victims Advisor actually do?
Well, the official line is that I give independent and contestable advice to the government around victims kaupapa. So it's all about what can we do in the wider system than just justice, but I do report to the Justice Minister primarily, to improve things for victims and survivors of crime. So that could be anything like I could give some advice saying sentencing for driving that causes death needs to be reviewed, and this is why I believe it should be, and here's some expert evidence as to what other jurisdictions do, etc., etc. Or it could be as basic but still difficult as operational, saying we've got 10,000 victims that are still waiting for their reparation payments to be made. How do we help the Ministry of Justice operationalise that?
Right. So to be clear, you're not sort of acting as a supporter for victims directly anymore. It is that more advisory.
I am a systemic voice, so I will comment in media and give advice around systemic issues for victims and survivors. But I previous to this, which we may well get into, for about 15 years, I would be advocating for a particular person or particular whānau with their individual challenge within the system or their experience of crime. So I'm using all of that lived experience and obviously all my connections across the system to advise at a system level rather than an individual whānau level.
I guess the fact that we even need a Chief Victims Advisor suggests that we are not at the end of the road in terms of having a victim-centric justice system. Would that be a fair comment?
That's fair. Yes. I always say, so the criminal justice system is a legacy system, it's come from the UK way back in the day, and when you go to court, it is the defendant and the police, or Crown and the defendant. On all of the documents, the whole process surrounds itself around what was alleged to have happened from a defendant's perspective, and are they guilty or not guilty. And because of that, the victim is not central to the system. And so over the years, there have been changes to introduce more victims' voice into the system. But at the end of the day, the document still says Crown versus Simon, and Ruth's voice isn't there. And that's my purpose. My purpose is to make, if you think about the scales of justice, they're always supposed to be, and when you see the picture of them, they're 50-50. But in reality, when you speak to most victims of crime, they feel very unheard. They feel that they might get 10% of the attention and the communication and the consideration, and that the offender or the alleged offender might get 90. So my job is to go,
Yep.
You know, I've worked with hundreds of families for homicide, for example, where you know, the outcomes, the justice experience is re-traumatising. You know, we often talk about 17 cars up the driveway, and I have to tell my story to the person that wins to stop his or her benefit. I have to, you know, talk to the coroner's office. I have to talk to the police person. I have to talk to the victim support person. I have to talk to the NGO who's supporting my daughter. And so there's all these conversations that re-traumatise me. So it's not, you know, people are really quick off the mark. You're complaining about sentencing. Sentencing is actually way down the list of priorities for most victims. Most victims want to have a quick justice system that is seen to be served, but that it doesn't re-traumatise me. I don't have to talk to 25 people, and I don't have to keep ringing them. I don't have to drive this. I actually want someone to awhi me, to hold me and navigate me from day one to day 1,000,000 or day 100, depending on what my needs are. But we haven't quite got to that point yet.
Yeah, I've always felt that speed to get to court must be horrendous for victims of crime,
brutal.
because it can be years. It can be absolute years, and every day in that period must be horrible. And then to have to go back to court and have the details of the crime presented to the court, and perhaps see the offender and all the rest. I've always felt that that the wheels of justice. I mean, it's a cliche to say they move slowly, but they do seem to move very slowly in New Zealand. Are we amongst the worst? Or
we're not great, but actually. Since COVID, most places aren't great. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that. It's a very manual process right now, so you would know yourself. It's lots of paper. So there is a project out of Ministry of Justice called Taurika where the courts will be digitised. Now that is going to make a huge difference. Are we there yet? No. Do we need to get there? Absolutely, we need to get there. So there are definitely work streams happening to improve what they call timely justice, because the backlogs of cases that it's just brutal. You know, I've got families who I was supporting. It's actually a year ago today that I started this job. Before I started in this official role, who are still waiting. You know, they have done their disclosures. The police have done an investigation. Someone may have been charged, but they still haven't got to a trial date. Yeah. And it literally puts your life on pause.
And the ability of lawyers to increase the delay just seems to be unfettered, doesn't it? I mean, a number of times I was in court as a journalist, and a lawyer would seek an adjournment for an extension for whatever reason, and it's just almost rubber stamped most times, isn't it? Because no judge is going to deny somebody the right to get a further psych report or whatever it might be. But it just seems to be, you can almost game the system by delaying it as long as you like, and then you get a ruling you don't like, you appeal the ruling, and that automatically extends it because...
It's really hard when you're the victim. You know, if you're wrongfully accused, all of those processes are really important, right? You need to be able to appeal something that's wrong and mad and, but from a victim's perspective, you are completely you're out of control. You know, you can't control any of that. So it becomes very, very difficult. The waiting is, the word is brutal. It is brutal.
Is there a jurisdiction around the world that does it well?
Look, if you look at Austria and Germany and some of the European nations have a different system. For example, our system is adversarial. So as you would know with your time in the media, you can go into a courtroom. It's never like TV, it's not CSI, Law and Order, but it is a very adversarial system where the Crown has to prove their case that you did what they alleged. And so there's a bit of theatrics and, it can be very difficult when you are a witness being cross-examined, etc. Some other jurisdictions have what's called inquisitorial, which is what we have for a coroner's process, which I really love, because personally from a victim's perspective, I have sat with them and I see the healing that comes when it's not this side versus this side. The court's job is actually to get under the hood, look at all of the evidence and determine what actually happened.
That's right, yeah. You're bringing back memories from your first year law, actually, about 40 years ago, believe it or not. But yeah, you're entirely right. I think most people would be surprised to know that under our judicial system, the adversarial system, the purpose is not actually to find the truth. The purpose is to give both sides their shot in court and may the best man win. That's basically it. Whoever presents the best case will win on the day.
And you don't know that until you're a victim of crime.
Yeah.
I would be a kabillionaire if I had $1.50 for every time a victim survivor had said to me, or one of their support people or whānau, oh my goodness, I had no idea that it wasn't, that they just, you are thrown into, you're going along your daily business and then all of a sudden your daughter is assaulted. You have no idea. You assume that you will be supported well, you assume that you will be communicated with the whole time and that it's about you. And then all of a sudden it's not. And it's a very different system to what you thought.
And this is one of the many imbalances in the justice system, isn't it? Because if you have the means to afford a very, very, very good lawyer, it improves your chances of winning greatly. So it stacks the deck. If you're a middle-income citizen and you're up against an extremely wealthy, powerful figure who can afford a top KC, they have an advantage over the person that can't. And it's one of the many injustices in the justice system, really.
Yeah, I've always said we have two systems, one for people who have resources and one who doesn't. And it is the same actually for victims. If you can afford private therapy, if you can go to a lawyer who will give you some advice around what to expect next, etc. You're not in control. You're never in control because you're not a party to the proceedings, like we said before. But it does make it easier for you if you can access immediate counselling when you're sexually assaulted, for example. Most people, and we should be able to turn to the state to hold us and support us in that process. But there's about a 14-week on average wait list for sensitive claims out of ACC. So 14 weeks is a long time.
Yeah.
And these outcome or these system delays and inefficiencies, and that's why I'm working really hard to take away all these silos and this kind of fragmented approach. That all changes the trajectory of your life. So I dream of a day that you come in, you disclose, or something's happened to you. God forbid something's happened to you, but you're held from that point consistently and professionally, all the way through to whenever you need it, and you can dip in and out of it. You might be having a good few years because someone's incarcerated, and you can get your life back on track, and then all of a sudden parole happens. Or it's your wedding day and you're triggered. Yeah. Whatever that is, you should be able to dip in and out so that we can hold you appropriately and what you and your whānau need, not what the system tells you when you need it.
Yeah, right. But I think a lot of people don't realise how often the outcome of a trial is actually determined almost before the trial starts. And that might be because in a case where there is a he said, she said type situation, for example, there is often preliminary hearings about what the jury may or may not be told.
Yeah, yes.
And the judge might well rule something out as being prejudicial, and the jury never gets to hear that evidence. And I've certainly sat in cases where I've spoken to jurors afterwards, which is a little bit naughty, but anyway, we'll ignore that. And they have said, if I had known blah, blah, my decision would have been different.
All the time. I get emails from jurors, and I have for 15, I've been in this game for 15 years. I have often been approached by people who have been on a jury, and they either say, we should have known that, or I am so horrified at the outcome of that. Yeah. And you will have seen the same thing. Sometimes juries, so for example, you only have a sentencing after there's a guilty verdict, and that's, sentencing can be 6 to 8 weeks after that, for example. Now, sometimes, and the jury gets told, so sometimes some of the jury members come back in to see the sentencing. And I worry about the health of our juries too. You get paid $60 a day or whatever it is. So that's very difficult for people who run their own businesses, people who can't get childcare. So I'm encouraging a look at how we pay our jury and how we select our jury. And there is actually an amendment bill in front of, in fact, I think it's at second reading, which will introduce some technology into the whole jury process, which means that you won't have to show up Monday and then get sent home and come back Tuesday and get sent home. Yeah. We can allocate you to a jury pool a bit more efficiently, which will be good for everybody. But again, these legislation changes are slow because there's just so much legislation going through. But anyway, when that happens, that will be more efficient. However, and yes, you are offered EAP counselling once you've sat on a jury. But I worry about the health of, it is your civic duty, and I encourage everybody to be on a jury. But when you're in court as often as me and you look at the jury, are they really a representation of the community? Yeah. Because that's what juries used to be. They used to be a subset of your community, and they knew that Simon was a little bit naughty, and he, was...
This is an example only.
It's an example only. He's a little bit naughty, but he would never do anything malicious. He's just a little bit, versus Ruth, who might have a little bit of kleptomania, for example. That's where juries came from. They were a jury of our peers. Are they a jury of our peers now? Are they really culturally competent to sit on some of the trials that I walk into the rooms? Do they understand some of the migrant community? At the moment, anyone can opt for a jury trial. So should we move that to say, okay, well, it's actually only charges that are 9 years or above, because that would then make the process of getting to trial quicker, right? There's a judge alone trial. That's that's a more efficient way of running things. You don't have ups and downs and people coming in and out. And just from a timely perspective, that would make our system quicker. And that's what some other jurisdictions do. But that didn't happen. So, there are things within the system like that would certainly improve the timeliness for all parties. Because this is the other thing. If you're accused of something rightly or wrongly, you're either on remand or you might have a bracelet on and you're stuck at home. It's not... as much as my kaupapa is the victim survivor, I'm a human. And why are we making everybody pause and their lives are, or everyone's lives are on hold. Yeah. And we've also got a bit of a, we do have, not a bit of, a shortage with some lawyers. So workforce is a problem. So anybody who's got children, go, please, be a lawyer and stay here and practice law, because that is another problem, a huge problem that's happening, is that I can't get representation, therefore things are delayed.
Yeah, it probably it's a hard thing to say. We need more lawyers. The country needs more lawyers, but it is true.
It's true.
I tell you what, I don't know how true this is. Maybe you might have heard this, maybe got some thoughts on it, but the sort of unconventional wisdom amongst court reporters was always that if you know you're guilty, you go for a jury trial because it's like a roll of the dice. The jury just might like you.
Yeah. And look, I have worked with people who are incarcerated and have offended, and that is a known.
Right.
You will roll the dice. Why would you not roll the dice?
Absolutely. The judge will see straight through it, but the jury might buy it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's probably the last word on the jury system. But I do think actually most people want to serve on a jury. I must admit, I actually turned it down last year. I really wanted to do it because, first of all, I'm interested in that sort of role and interested in justice and all the rest of it, obviously. But, it was set down for 5 or 6 weeks. So it was obviously a big case. Just couldn't do it realistically. I just, in my line of work, just could not be away for that time. And
that goes to me, I do worry about our juries, because that is a long time away from your life, where you can't talk to anyone about it. Monday to Friday, it's a very arduous process for our amazing people who have decided to do their civic duty. And cases are getting more and more complex. That's the other thing that's affecting our juries, but also affecting timeliness. Everyone's got one of these phones that's got forensics all over it, and so you have to wait for those forensics, but then you end up with all this additional evidence that we never used to have in cases before, right?
Yeah, true.
And now everything is a much longer duration because everybody's reading through the text messages and the Snapchats and the WhatsApps and where
it was pinging off a cell phone tower and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about yourself now and how you came to this role. You mentioned 15 years and working with victims. How did that come about? Because were you a victim of crime yourself, may I ask, or what was your sort of motivation?
I don't like talking about myself. So I'm not a victim of crime, well, a burglary
right.
Only, which was hideous in an invasion. So I certainly am not belittling that experience at all. However, no. I was a marketer by trade. So I ran marketing agencies. I sold my business and thought, I'm going to take a year off. So I wrote to the SPCA and Sensible Sentencing and said, hey, I've donated to you guys for years. I'm taking a year off. I could maybe redo your websites or something. I'm a marketer. Just let me know if you're interested. I never heard from the kitty cats, but I did hear from Garth McVicker at Sensible Sentencing. And at that time, Christy Marceau had just been murdered. And my full disclosure, my father was a court reporter and my mother was a teacher, so kind of grew up, and my brother was a policeman.
Right.
So grew up in a kind of justice world,
yeah.
Justice conversations. And so I'd been following the Marceau alleged murder at that time. So when Garth said, I'm coming up for a meeting, I was like, sure, I'll meet you. That will be fine. So I was volunteering there for a while, helping victims of crime navigate the justice system.
I think that's where our paths first crossed as well. I was with TVNZ then, and you came on board. Yeah.
Yep. And I think that was easier for that group because Garth is in the Mohaka Valley in the kind of Napier-ish way, whereas I was Auckland Central, and so I was able to kind of get to things easier. And as much as I didn't really enjoy cameras in my face, I wanted to be the voice for victims, so I just kind of didn't watch it and gave a comment. So that was my mahi for a long time. And then I left there and was Ruth Money private victim advocate because I thought, okay, what should I call myself? I don't want to set myself up as a charity or anything, and I don't want to get paid for my mahi because I want to be able to throw bombs and change the system. And I thought that if I'd applied for funding, that would make my role difficult. So, and I kept getting overwhelmed with need. So I just kept going and going. And then, and so the Ministry of Justice, bless them, were very patient with me. I would write constantly complaining about this or suggesting that or asking about this. And also any politician. And then, a year and a bit ago, Minister Goldsmith reached out and said, hey, we've got a Chief Victims Advisor role. And I'd been harassing him big time for name suppression laws and all sorts of things that I really did want to give him some advice about. And here I am.
Well, that very short summary in no way does justice to all the work you've done over those 15 years and all the hundreds of people you've worked with. And one case that I know did have a bit of a formative effect on you early on, before you actually even really became involved in this line of work, is when we have something in common, which is the Louisa Damajane case in Christchurch. And I should just mention that to listeners that Louisa was a 6-year-old girl who was abducted and murdered by a criminal called Peter Holdham, who had 66 previous convictions, and this all happened in the 1980s from memory. I actually went to Holdham's parole hearing, I think probably the only journalist that had at that point. And it was one of those times you will have had this experience from being in court, but it was one of those times you just know that you're in the room with somebody who is wired completely differently to most human beings, absolute denial, almost saw himself as a victim of what had happened. But yeah, just listening to his answers, and he wasn't an inarticulate person, but you just felt this guy is wired differently.
There's an energy, hey?
Yeah. So it's a very strange thing. I only saw it a few times in my career, but and mostly at parole hearings, actually. You would just you'd just be listening to someone, you just think, your brain just, there's something wrong there. It's just not fused together properly. But that case it did have an effect on you, didn't it? Well, why did it strike such a chord?
Well, I'm from Ōtautahi Christchurch, and my father's a court reporter. And I mean, she's just such an innocent wee thing going about her day, and we should all be able to live our lives without some predator. And, that type of offending is what I call the 1%ers. They are I don't want to even make them famous and mention their names, but they are that really top majority of people that I am on record a number of times talking about in terms of our very high risk. It's the energy that you're talking about. It's the you're wired differently. We have to do everything we can to protect our communities from these people.
Yeah.
So that definitely did sow a seed. And sadly, in New Zealand or in any community or country, there are a few of those people.
Yeah. And those cases really stay with you, don't they? I mean, again, I have nowhere near the level of experience you have, but I think probably Coral Burrows was one for me. I was with the Sunday News back then, and Coral Burrows was a little girl who was murdered in Featherston, and this must be, crikey, I'm trying to think how long ago that would be now. 20 years ago, probably, maybe longer actually. And, I'd drive over to Featherston every day from Wellington, and it was just horrible, Everything about it was just awful. She was just this little girl who, just a victim of senseless violence, and there was just no redeeming qualities to the crime or the person who committed it, and the environment was horrible, and you just thought, it's just such a tragedy to see a young victim just never really having a chance. It's just awful.
No, that's right. And the devastation, we talk about the ripple effect, and everyone says, look at this poor person's family, and that's right. That's absolutely right. But it ripples out to the person who drove the school bus, the friends at school, the people at the dance class, the person with the dairy up the road. The community has this ripple effect that we currently don't really acknowledge exists, and certainly the system doesn't help with as many people who are affected by some of those just hideous tragedies, often premeditated by monsters.
Yeah.
And we have to acknowledge that. Do I want no prisons in New Zealand? Yes. It would be great if we had no prisons in New Zealand. Do we need prisons in New Zealand? Yes.
Absolutely. Let's come back to that later, because I do want to ask you about that, actually. I've got that down here to ask you about. Yeah. But while we're talking about individual cases, and this is the last one I think I'm planning to bring up, and you mentioned it earlier, the Christy Marceau case, which I know you were very involved in and had an effect on you as well. And by way of background, this was a case around 15 years ago. Christy was killed by a deeply disturbed man who had previously detained and seriously assaulted her, and then he'd been allowed out on bail. This is the bit that you really just shake your head about. He was allowed out on bail despite the opposition of the police, obviously despite the opposition of Christy and her family, and then to be 300 metres away from where she lived.
I've got goosebumps.
Yeah, and then obviously went back there and killed her in the most horrendous fashion, and I apologise to anybody who's listening if I have invoked any bad memories or emotions, I do apologise.
The system isn't joined up, right? There are silos, and coming out this week there will be the coroner's decision into the death of little Malachi, for example. And that is another example where this silo doesn't talk to this silo, and the violence, often homicide, that was preventable, was so preventable, but as a result of all the different fragmentations, that's the stuff that keeps me, like literally keeps me awake at night. That's the stuff I want to fix. When I talk about the victim's journey from day 1 to day 100, there are so many preventable, particularly in the family violence space and sexual violence space, where we know someone's dangerous. We know that. They're escalating. You know, Tainui, he killed Kimberley on the West Coast. He's released in Christchurch. He's escalating.
Yeah.
And then he kills Nicole Tuxford. I never want to sit in another coroner's hearing because I know what the report's going to say. I know what their recommendations are going to say. Police, you need to talk to, corrections, you need to talk to, oranga tamariki, you need to talk to. It's not that hard. And, when I spoke to the Justice Minister when he was talking to me about this role, and I said, well, I don't just want to report to you, sir. This, for me, this kaupapa is human. It's humanity. And I need to be able to talk around education and health and corrections and what comes under the Justice Minister. And I get that, there's ministries and silos because that's how the government's set up and that's how the budgets work. But we have to do a better job across the system, because that's where I see most of the preventable failures happening.
I guess part of the challenge is that you've always got the human element. So I said I wasn't going to bring up any more individual cases. I am going to bring up another individual case, and that's the Graham Burton case. And a lot of people will remember it, but Graham Burton had been jailed for murder. He was assessed by the parole board as being low enough risk for release, and then went on another rampage where people died. And again, apologies to anybody who's listening who was affected by that, and condolences to you. And in fairness to the head of the parole board who authorised the release, I spoke to him about that, and he said it will haunt him till he dies. And obviously a huge regret, but he made the best decision as he could at the time. But that's the challenge, isn't it? Is that human element. At some point somebody is going to use judgment and say, this guy is safe or this guy isn't safe. And it's hard to mitigate that, isn't it?
It is, but again, that's why I'm saying you have to triangulate that evidence, and people need to change out their roles. So often when I see a corrections failure, we see psych assessments being done by someone who has been working with Simon, poor Simon, not Simon, but hypothetically Simon, for many years. And that's not the right way to then do a psychological assessment on risk. So it's garbage in, garbage out with the parole board. The parole board can only make a decision on whether you have got undue risk with what that material is in front of them.
True.
So how does the system improve to make sure that that information that goes into that parole board hearing, and the victims who have got lived experience, which should be privileged over everything, how do we make sure that they're engaged in the process and that the parole board is getting the right information to make the right decision?
Yeah.
So that, that's my gig. That's my passion.
And to help people understand the parole system and how it works is, although the offender does appear usually in front of the board, the wisdom that they operate under, as explained to me, was that no offender can talk their way into getting parole, but they can certainly talk their way out of getting parole.
Yeah, it's probably
so it is an evidence-based decision. It's not like you might have seen in the movies where somebody rolls up and promises to go straight and you see the big stamp.
Oh, absolutely
down.
not.
It doesn't quite work like that.
Absolutely
so there is a lot of evidence and science behind it, and it's not done on a whim. But just in terms of crime generally, why do we have so much violent crime in New Zealand?
Wow. Well, now I'm going to start on a rant. I think we allow, as a society, a lot of behaviour that is not acceptable, and it builds. I look at bullying in a school, and I look at just the most terrible responses. And I'm not trying to throw teachers under the bus. I'm not trying to throw the MOE under the bus. They're busy, all of the things. However, we let Simon bully Ruth. You're never going to have me back.
No.
We let Simon bully Ruth, and and then that behaviour is accepted and it escalates. You then look at what's happening in that home. You overlay the social and economic challenges that many are having. It's stressful. I yell and scream a bit. All of a sudden that becomes something that I model as a child, and I grow up. And I talk about, breaking these cycles of behaviour. Behaviour's learned. Family violence is learned, so you can unlearn it. Yes, it's going to take us generations, but we have to start now. We have to start with prevention. We react, of course we do, call 111, of course there's going to be a reaction. But I turn the radio on and I hear, this isn't very good for this podcast, I turn on the radio and I hear ads saying, slow down, stop driving, which the MTA I'm sure would absolutely sponsor.
100%.
Slow down, driving fast kills. Where's all the prevention around, have you got an anger problem, call this number and we'll help you. It's not okay. It's okay to be the help. Reach out. Have a conversation with your fellow humans. So there's a lot of things, you turn on Parliament TV and you see how some of the MPs and the ministers are attacking each other. I mean, as a community, there's so much yuck. Where's our humanity gone? I always talk about, well, do you know your neighbour? Why don't you know your neighbour? Have you knocked on the door of your neighbour and said, hey, I'm Ruth and I live next door. It's nice to meet you. If you ever need anything, I'm here. Do we do that anymore?
It feels like it's getting worse, doesn't it? And it sounds like a long bow to draw, but I don't think it is really, is that it's fueled from the top now as well, because you have this politics of division and politics of violence. Most obvious example is America, USA. And you just think, well, it's just feeding that whole violence is okay. It promotes a violent culture. And we're a long way from the US at the moment. But you see that rhetoric creeping into our politics, don't you?
Yeah. Social media, digital stuff is fed to us through an algorithm. Every day I am having conversations with people who do not understand how that works. Where are our education programs to make sure that people understand that? Do parents actually understand what's happening on their children's devices and how the algorithm works? I'm terrified. My mother, I'm not on Facebook. My mother's on Facebook. I'm terrified she's going to click on something and go down a rabbit hole because that's how the technology works. But people don't understand that it's a projection. It's a projection, and we're so susceptible, and technology's so clever that it's moving really quickly, and the law doesn't move as quickly.
Well, actually, that's a very good. I don't know how much we want to talk about this, but that's a very good point to raise, because with AI now and the deep fakes that are becoming incredibly prevalent, the law is way, way, way behind on that.
Yes, it absolutely is.
That must be a focus for you.
It is, yes. I've given advice to ministers and I are often discussing that. Yes, so digital harm, online harm, whatever you want to call it, is a huge topic, right? So there's the sexual violence and the deep fakes, there's the CSAM, the child exploitation. What are we doing in this country to protect our children? Half of the sexual violence has happened when you were, or you've disclosed it as an adult, but you were a child, or it's happening to children right now when it's disclosed. Half sexual violence in New Zealand is affecting a child. So, of course, their life trajectory is then at risk if we cannot wrap around the appropriate care at that time. That's just horrific. So what are we doing around CSAM and child exploitation? What are we doing around scam and frauds? So there is a lot in the online space that is a priority for the minister. Multiple ministers, actually, because we've also got Erica Stanford, for example, who's the Workforce and Education Minister. So she's across that part of it from a child safety, children online perspective. There's Minister Simpson from an online and anti-scam perspective. So what does the response look like to stop offending online and protect us in New Zealand, and if and when it does happen, support our victims on the way through.
One step that I've always thought would be a very simple, practical one to break the cycle of violence or crime that you referred to before, where it's intergenerational, would be to not allow children under a certain age into court to see their parent facing charges. Because, again, you go to any district court in the country pretty much on any given day, you will see somebody up on quite serious charges, often male assaults, female and domestic situation, and the children are there to watch the process. Now, I actually mentioned this to Judith Collins one time years and years ago, and she was supportive. She was like, that's actually good thinking. But as soon as it got run past some civil libertarians, they threw their arms up and said, no, you can't deny somebody the right of their children there to... Yeah. And I get that argument, but to me it's normalising the situation.
I've written a piece of advice around there are so many gaps in our wider system when it comes to children. They go to court and they see that. What are we doing online to protect them? What is the response in education like? Where is their consent education at? And what does that look like? Because with harmful sexual behaviour, they need to know their safe words. They need to know who to disclose to. And the people that they're disclosing to need to know how to react properly and not brush that under the carpet or not ruin the disclosure from an evidential perspective. There are so many gaps in our system. When there is a family harm incident in the house and the police show up and they might give a protection order or they might give a police safety order where mum and dad, whatever it looks like, are pulled apart for 3-5 days. Yep. What happens with the children? Is anybody arriving to hold those children immediately? Like we will find out this week with the coroner's inquest into Molokai. When we are incarcerating people, have we checked that they have children? Have we checked that they understand the consequences of what might happen now and what is going to be the best for the child? There are so many gaps in our system. It blows my mind that we do not prioritise children.
Yeah. Yeah. Jill, just moving slightly sideways, but picking up on the theme of incarceration, and I should mention that MTA has around 900 service station members, big chunk of the industry, and they are very frequent targets for crime. There's over 20,000 thefts at service stations and the fuel thefts at service stations in the last 12 months. That's just what's reported. It's actually far more than that. And the reason for the lack of reporting is that a lot of service station businesses have lost faith in police to follow up and take it seriously. And we all get the resourcing argument. Difficult for police. They've got to prioritise. But notwithstanding that, there was generally a lot of ill feeling out there that it's a waste of time to report it because nothing will happen. So don't bother. And then the second part of that feeling is that even if it is pursued through the courts, I should also add there's a lot of violent crime against service stations as well, smash and grabs and ram raids have declined considerably. Different story, but anyway, we'll stick with the general principle. And then once they do get to court, there is the feeling that offenders get the proverbial slap on the wrist and, off they go and they're treated very lightly. So what's the point? Are tougher sentences part of the solution? And I ask that completely openly. I mean, we certainly have lighter sentences in some jurisdictions, USA, for example. Is that part of the solution or not?
I think for some crimes, tougher sentences are appropriate. But I do subscribe to the rule of law, which is that it's the judge's court and the judge needs to make that decision based on the material that they have in front of them because every case is so different. It's so different. While sentencing is important, but actually for me it's about how we make the court process quicker for everybody. That would do so much good. While you are on remand, you are not able to access any help. You can't start any courses because you haven't been found guilty of the allegation. So we can't actually get you any help right now, even if, you're crying out for help. While those delays are happening, the victim's going, well, I've been traumatised, where's my help? So there's also many victims, they do care about a sentence, but what they really care about is that that person cannot hurt anybody else like that again. Yeah. And, I have worked with, let's say, thousands of victims and survivors. If it happens to you and the police arrive or whatever, that's a slightly different thing. You haven't proactively chosen to disclose the crime. But I would say 100% of the people that I have worked with who have actively chosen to disclose, every one of their motivation, it is, I don't want it to happen to anybody else. Yeah. That is their top motivation. So it's not necessarily the sentencing, lock them away and throw away the key at all. It's about, because we all acknowledge these people will get out if they go to jail at all. So it's about how do you manage them? How do you help them recognise their triggers? Can you? Are they the 1%ers where we absolutely have to be protected? Or are they someone where we can integrate slowly, we can teach them, we can try and break into generational harm, we can get them a job, we can get them a driver's licence and let them actually retrain to do something. We can help them find their mana, which will, so, it's not one sentence is going to fix everything at all. It is a really complex beast. And I think that's why everybody challenges with it. I will always remember lovely Chester Burrows, God rest his soul, and he said, I was on a consult with Justice Minister Little with Chester, and Chester was our chair, and we had our first tui, and he sat at the front and he just went, well, this is how you eat an elephant. Where are we going to start? Right. It's so true because it's so complex. It's so complex.
And a very hard balance to strike between punishment, which should be part of the system, I think most people would agree, and rehabilitation, which is an extremely important part of it. And I guess in the case of murder, this is probably an example where there is an effort at finding the balance. And I think a lot of people probably don't really realise what goes on there. First of all, most people would be very surprised how quickly many murderers get moved to low security and in fact are working outside the wire. So that rehabilitation side of it is quite good. And then on the punishment side of it, I think people should be reassured that when they hear that so-and-so got life with a minimum non-parole period of 10 years, 12 years, that does not mean 10 or 12 years. 99% of people who commit murder do not get parole at the first appearance. They get parole considerably later than that, if at all.
But we don't tell people that, right?
Exactly. So no one understands it, no one knows it. And so instead they just hear the 10 years and they're like, 10 years? But there's a lot of other work that's going on at the same time to make sure they are fit for
I was at school a long time ago, but when I get on one of these rants, as I am now, some people say to me, we learnt that in socials, or we learnt that in civics at school. I'm like, oh, okay. Can we do that again, please? Because there's so many people who I will be sitting in a courtroom and the offender has been found guilty. We're at a sentencing. The survivor's given a victim impact statement. Everything's happened. And the judge says, you're sentenced to 9 years. Everyone's like, oh, phew, okay, I don't need to think about that for 9 years. That's great. But actually, you need to think about that in 3 years, for example, because if there's no minimum non-parole period, parole kicks in, parole eligibility kicks in at a third. But it's those basic bits of learning that as an advocate, I always made sure my survivors knew, because there's so many little surprises like that in the system where we assume when we're not a victim and we're thrown into this crazy world where everyone speaks this different language, like literally speaks a jargon of a call over or whatever, or like, wow. We need to do something more to educate our population around this is actually what it means. And life does mean life. It doesn't mean that they're incarcerated for life up to them really, actually, how that goes. But that parole, if there's not a minimum non-parole period, is a third of a sentence. And, a victim impact statement is you can have your voice heard at this time. Yeah, there are some basics that I would love for people to understand around the legal process.
I agree, and I'm sure there are resources out there that address some of this, but I don't know, because so often the answer to these sort of questions is go to our website and all the information is on the website. It's not actually a very engaging way to find this stuff out, is there? But I assume there are booklets and hard copy resources and things that are made available.
Yeah, I mean, the Ministry of Justice is kind of the steward of the justice process and certainly, running the courts. There are pamphlets and stuff. But I guess when you're a traumatised victim, I want people to know about this stuff before it happens to them, because when you're a traumatised victim or you're alleged of, doing something terrible and you have or you haven't, your brain has got a whole lot of other things to deal with rather than to go, I might just look in that pamphlet. Okay, well, in 18 months' time it'll be a third of the sentence.
And it can feel a bit cursory too, I guess, a pamphlet, can't it?
It's difficult. It's difficult. So,
yeah. One thing that really bugs me about commentary around crime is the focus on offending by Māori, which tends to completely overlook the fact that Māori are vastly overrepresented as victims of crime.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
It just gets no attention whatsoever.
No. Drives me wild. I went up to Waitangi last week and was in a room with an amazing group of community providers. So there's a program called Te Ao Marama that the Chief District Court Judge runs through. It's up to... So the judiciary own the program, and it is when they are partnering with iwi in their area, a community partner who will do anything from bail support, victim support, you name it, they work. And the third, so there's 8 processes or 8 guidelines of Te Ao Marama, and the third one is to ensure that victims are seen or heard. And I really enjoy that, Mahi, and I really, is it right yet? No. Is it getting there? Yes, it's getting there, because it is all about seeing you as a whole person. And they're doing such great work within the Māori community for victims and people who are offending.
Yeah. Is the just big question here, hard one to answer, is the justice system biased against
I think so.
communities like Māori and Pacifica?
Yeah, I think it is. That's probably not a very popular comment, but yeah, I do think it is. I mean, I sit in a court and I see different outcomes for different ethnicities. The Ministry of Justice is doing some work to try and show, are there genuinely different outcomes and why have they happened? So they're doing work on, is there a gap in sentencing? Are there different outcomes for different people? And if there are, why? Why here Māori? Why are they being incarcerated because they were stealing food for their family? Would I be?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the social inequities and inequalities feed into it too, doesn't it? We were talking before about being able to afford the best quality lawyer is going to increase your chances of success if you're a defendant. So housing plays into this a lot because there might not be a bail address. Right.
So someone with resources has got someone who will be able to find a bail address. Someone with less resources, housing a bail address is more challenging. And then, of course, you get a lot of opposition to bail where you don't want that alleged offender or that alleged sex offender living next to you in your community. Completely understand that. So all of a sudden you end up with this one of the main pressure points that I see is that we don't have enough safe places for people who are coming out of prison or who are, on wanting to get bail but are on remand. And so it does negatively affect our Māori communities.
What did you think of Te Pāti Māori's call to abolish prisons by 2040? I mean, when you sort of first hear of having a society where there's no prison. At first it seemed a little bit cuckoo, it did to me anyway, but then when you start thinking about it a bit more, you actually see the merit in the argument. And okay, it's very, very idealistic and aspirational, but that should be the focus, shouldn't it? To create a society and a community in a country where you don't need prisons. That would be such a great way to live.
Wouldn't it? Everybody should be striving for that. I don't think we can ever get there because of those people who are just wired a bit differently for whatever reason. And, community protection. I think this is the other thing. I'm not some crazy woke whatever. We need protection. The community's protection, the victim's protection actually needs to become number one, in my opinion. However, are there lots of people who are incarcerated who shouldn't be? Yes, I believe that is correct. I think the other thing that corrections probably isn't very good with their brand is, yes, they run prisons, but they also have many people in the community. They have a huge community-based service. So can we increase that? Can people be genuinely rehabilitated? And what does that look like? Because again, are we spending the right money in the right places? If I think about the stopping violence programs that someone might have to do because they've strangled their partner, that's a 6-week stopping violence program. Really? 6 weeks is going to undo a lifetime of learned behaviour and anger problems? No, it's absolutely not. And I also know that many of those females, often females, have a worse experience during that 6-week program and after, because we can learn some tips and tricks on a 6-week program.
Yeah, right.
And so are we doing enough to then kind of monitor moving forward? Or do we just go, cool, you've done your 6-week program? Yeah. So what does true rehabilitation look like? And that's why I love the Te Ao Marama and the providers who are providing a wraparound service for a long period of time. They walk alongside that whānau. Because, again, that's humanity to me. That's not, thanks very much, you've done a 6-week project.
I guess the flip side to having less prisons and greater rehabilitation and reintegration is the tough-on crime approach. Now, I know I don't want to put you in an awkward position where you have to criticise government, but, I mean, this government's approach to crime has very much been, we're getting tough on crime. Makes a great headline. It's a great thing to be able to stand on a pulpit and say, we're delivering, we're tough on crime. Yep. But is it actually counterproductive? Is it effective?
Well, I think, so one of the government target that I work to is about less victims, and I'm all for that. So if you have to get tough on crime to have less victims, I don't have a problem with that. Do I think that we can be smart and effective with how we deliver strategies to achieve that? Yes, I do. And I could talk all day. I could talk all day and write a whole lot of plans operationally for corrections, for police, for Ministry of Justice, for courts, about how we can really operationalise what that means at the front line. Yeah. Because, victims are not seen and not heard. And so they need to know that someone has got their back, and they didn't feel like that.
Yeah, and I don't want to bag government, because I genuinely think they want to do something about crime. I genuinely think they've made progress, and I think there's a lot of good intentions and very good people in the police and justice area who are working towards that. But I just do wonder sometimes if there's a lot of police cars at the bottom of the cliff, and is there enough fences, or whatever the opposite of that analogy is, at the top of the fence? Have we got the weighting right, where we're working in homes to stop people becoming criminals before they actually are? All that kind of thing. Are we neglecting that in favour of more cops, tougher sentences, and all that sort of rhetoric?
Well, I think you've got to start somewhere, and from a victim's perspective, we did want more cops. We felt like we couldn't walk around and be safe, and if you talk to some of those retailers where police don't have the ability to show up all the time, there's certainly those things aren't just optics, they're just operational requirements. Do I think we have the balance right, though, in terms of prevention? No. I don't think we do. What I would like to see is, and there is a group within the Ministry of Justice called the Centre, and it's the Centre for Prevention of Sexual Violence and Family Violence, and they are funded from MSD, ACC, police, corrections. So they are a multidisciplinary team that is supposed to be preventing, and so there's a national strategy, Te Arerere Kura, around what do we do, workforce prevention, because we don't have any family court lawyers at the moment. How do you do that? Because otherwise we can't represent people to get protection orders and prevent harm happening. We don't have enough social workers. What are we doing there to make sure that we've actually got counselling and therapeutic stuff coming through? What does prevention look like in the home? How do we, the stopping violence programs, are they working? How could we make them work? Are they long enough, short enough? So that work is all happening. It's just not very sexy, and no one really sees that stuff.
And wouldn't it be great though if I guess this is the way our parliamentary system is set up, let alone our justice system. But wouldn't it be great if you could get a multi-party approach to this problem? Because you have Labour who have their position, which is very much on the prevention, rehabilitation, National on the other side, tough on crime. Wouldn't it be great to be able to merge the two, and get them working
And we did.
together?
Stalking legislation.
True, actually. Good example.
Thank you. Yes, stalking legislation. And I guess that's why it's not about me, but I love my job, because I can talk to every minister, it doesn't matter, any MP, everybody wants better outcomes for victims. Everybody agrees that victims should be at the centre of those decision-making. We should be better at prevention. It's not that Minister Goldsmith, Goldsmith and I can talk forever about prevention and what that looks like, and Minister Mitchell, the same thing. Everybody's on the same page, but I guess they've got 2 seconds to give a soundbite, so they choose those ones. But yes, I don't get shot down often because everybody knows that things should be and could be better for victims.
And wouldn't it be great if the adults could all get together in the room and do that more often?
Stalking,
that would be
yes,
the idea.
let's replicate that.
Yeah, I'm actually going to give Mark Mitchell a little shout out here because, I think he's actually a very good man, and I think his heart's in the right place. I think he's doing a lot of good work. And I must admit that when he first brought in the idea of the foot patrols for CBDs and the high visibility preventative patrols, I thought, I actually thought that was rubbish, to be honest. I just thought that's not going to work. And I will formally and happily admit that they have worked, and it was a good initiative, and congratulations to the Minister on that. And in fact, I think it has worked so well that we now would actually like to see it extended. And the reason for that is that obviously high visible police presence is a great deterrent. And what I've asked him and police to consider is extending that to motorised patrols in areas where service stations are hit frequently, either by just fuel theft or things more violent. And I'm sure that would work. I understand the resourcing argument, but it just seems to be such an easy way of preventing crime rather than catching crime.
And that's the key word, it's prevention. Yeah. So as much as people, like you went, I'm going, yes, this will prevent. It will also make our victims feel safer, because so many people have been victims of crime. So they are very triggered. They feel very unsafe. So that visibility does so much in the prevention world. So there is a balance. It is happening.
The gang patch one is another one that obviously must trigger a lot of people who have been victims of gang crime, and I think a lot of people were very sceptical about that when it was announced. This isn't good. Who's going to enforce this? Are they really going to break up a mongrel mob tangi to get the patches up? But the compliance has been incredible, hasn't it? It's been such a success against many predictions, I think. I don't know who deserves the kudos for that, whether it's the gangs or police or the minister. But
probably both, I imagine.
It's certainly worked, hasn't it? What do you think of the broken windows type approach to crime? I guess it's not a million miles from tough on crime, but I know this is another thing that MTA members sometimes say government should go back to, is the the broken windows idea where no crime is treated as too low level to follow up. You get a broken window, you follow up, you catch the person that did broke the window, you might stop them from committing a more violent crime next time. What do you think of that approach?
Yeah, I mean, certainly criminal behaviour escalates. So it's the burglar it's the peeping Tom who then gets in the house to burgle, who then gets in the bedroom, who then escalates. And that's a well-known fact that there is escalation within criminal offending. So I like a broken windows approach. I think about your members and I think about the smash and grabs, the threats, the drive-offs. What people easily forget, I think, is that there are staff members there who are feeling really scared because that happens. And so what I would love to see a quicker response, I'm sure police would too, and a response to every call. They can't do that right now. And I guess that's the reality with the broken windows thing, right? But a shout out to the Waiheke Police Station. I'm a little bit biased of where I live, but that is genuine community policing. So they have a route, they get in their car, they're not just sitting there waiting for a phone call, they are driving around, and of course it's a bit easier in our little district, but they're busy and they are driving around with their eyes and ears open, being seen. And that's kind of the broken windows. It's all about prevention. It makes me feel safer. It makes, Sarah, who lives next door to me, who, thought she was going to go out and tag something, think twice, or down to the Gull station to smash something, think twice. Presence is a key part of prevention.
Yeah, it's just common sense, really, isn't it? I mean, on a personal level, we live in a street where a police officer lives. And I take great comfort in the fact there was a police car outside his house every day. And I'm sure it was a great deterrent to anybody who was, thinking of breaking into a house in the street. So, I mean, on a human level, it works. But I actually think it's great that we've talked today and great to have reconnected because it's been years since we spoke. And I'm really looking forward to seeing if we can work together a little bit, because I know a lot of victims of service station crime, like others in the retail sector, it's a big, big problem, just don't feel they quite have a voice at the moment. And I would really, really like to work with you on MTA's behalf and on behalf of those businesses and those people who feel they just don't quite have enough of a voice and they're not really getting a fair shake from the system. So I really hope we can sort of stay in contact and take things a little bit further. That would be absolutely awesome. So great outcome. Look, we've talked about some very serious stuff today, which has been absolutely fascinating for me. I love this stuff, so I hope other people do as well. I find it all very fascinating. And should I also say that if you're interested in learning more about Ruth Money, please do Google Chief Victims Advisor, or your name. That's probably the easiest way rather than giving you a http:// blah, blah, blah. There's a good page on the Ministry of Justice website that explains everything that you do, and it's got your bio. So if anybody is interested in either contacting Ruth or finding out more about her work, please do Google her and you'll find out plenty. Good.
Google me. You know how that Google works though, eh? But yes, you can. And honestly, my job is to help. So I welcome those emails because it lets me know what I need to be changing in the system.
Good stuff. Excellent. All right, well, let's just finish on a lighter note. And being an MTA podcast and Motor Trade Association, obviously automotive type bent, we normally ask guests what sort of car they drive and whether they're a bit of a petrol head or strictly an A to B sort of person. Unfortunately, a week or so ago, I was talking to John Key and he admitted that he gives his cars names. I hope you are not one of those people that name your cars.
No, I'm good with not naming the car.
Thank goodness, because, I'm not a big fan of that sort of behaviour myself. But are you a motoring enthusiast or are you strictly A to B?
No, I like a bit of speed in my car.
Oh, excellent.
Yes, so I drive a Audi RS3 Sport, but we also have an electric. So the family has both. Right. But I like a little bit of juice.
Excellent. And have you always been that way? You got your licence at a young age and always had cars, that kind of thing?
Well, I lived rurally, so I mean, not really. It's just because I can afford one now, I guess. I mean, my first car, a Toyota Corolla. To and fro university. It was a very solid choice, very sensible, wasn't it? That got me to and from university. Probably my favourite mode of vehicle transport is probably the right word, is my paddleboard. So doesn't go very fast, but I can, poddle around in the sea in it, and I love that.
And you're living in the right areas to do it.
I am living in the right area to do it. But no, I do. I mean, gosh, I've been in all sorts of cars. I sound like a car snob. I guess I am, but I do love a bit of speed when I'm driving, whatever it is, whether it's a Toyota Corolla or not.
Very good, very good. And lastly, what does 2026 look like for you? You're obviously extremely busy, and we've covered quite a bit of your work, but an election year, of course.
Yeah, well, that's going to be interesting, right? So, I'm new into this role, so it is an election year. I've got lots of plans for whoever wants to talk to me about what they should be doing as a government. So, yes, there's advice. So I never stop giving advice, whether it be to the Education Minister, the Health Minister, Justice Minister, police, etc., and operational. So my two top priorities are a website that will navigate you, whether it's you that is the victim survivor or whānau who are helping you navigate, whether it be sexual violence, homicide, fraud, whatever it is. So it will be a one-stop shop, one source of truth, because there's so much out there that you don't actually know what's right or wrong. Number one. And as part of that, really, it's about designing a new service so that when you are a victim of crime, and I am sorry that you are held with the least number of interactions that re-traumatise you as possible in a professional service that really does keep you abreast of things, well informed of things, and you have agency as much as you can over the appropriate parts of that. Yeah.
Fantastic work.
Thank
that
you.
is really admirable work that changes and improves the lives of thousands of Kiwis.
I love it.
I absolutely take my hat off to you, and I'm sure many people do as well. So, thank you very much for coming along. It's been an absolute pleasure. Could have talked much longer, but great to cover the material that we did, and please do keep up the good work. It's been fantastic seeing you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you found that as interesting and fascinating and insightful as I did. We could have talked for a lot longer. That was a really great chat, and I hope people who have listened have got something from it. Do check out the other episodes of In the Fast Lane. Send us a comment, drop a like, but make sure you listen to the upcoming episodes. We've talked to some really great people this year, and we've got plenty more planned. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of MTA's In the Fast Lane. Thank you.